For decades, a single narrow waterway on the map has held the beating heart of the global economy hostage. The Strait of Hormuz, just 39 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, became Iran's most powerful weapon. Tehran held it like a loaded gun pressed against the temple of the world economy. The threat was simple, direct, and devastatingly effective. Close the strait, and oil stops moving. Close the strait, and Asia's factories go dark. Close the strait, and America is forced to the negotiating table on Iran's terms. For 40 years, that threat worked. Nations tiptoed around Tehran. Sanctions were softened. Concessions were made. The world quietly accepted that this narrow strip of water belonged, in all but name, to Iran. And then Saudi Arabia decided it had had enough. Not with a missile, not with a declaration of war, not with a dramatic military confrontation that the cameras of the world could capture. With a logistics network. What Riyadh has constructed over the past several months is one of the most breathtaking geopolitical counteroffensives in modern history. A triple-layered bypass system, built through oceans, highways, and steel pipelines, that is systematically dismantling the one weapon Iran spent 4 decades perfecting. And it is doing so without a single shot being fired, without a single soldier crossing a border, without a single missile leaving its launch pad. Saudi Arabia is winning one of the greatest strategic victories of the century, and the world is only just beginning to understand what that means. Let us start with the move that sent shockwaves through international maritime markets when it was confirmed in May 2026. The Saudi Ports Authority announced that the King Abdulaziz port in Jeddah, already the largest logistics hub on the Red Sea, had been directly connected to 9 of the world's most critical seaports. 9 ports spanning 3 continents. 9 anchors for a new global trade network that routes the world's energy and commerce entirely around the Strait of Hormuz. The announcement created what analysts described as an earthquake in international shipping circles. Because Jeddah had not simply built new berths or expanded its container capacity, it had rewired the architecture of global maritime trade. Routes that once had no choice but to thread through Hormuz, through the waters Iran has mined, patrolled, and threatened for decades, now have a permanent, fully operational alternative anchored in the Red Sea. But the strategic detail that cuts deepest, the detail that exposes the true fragility of Iran's position, is not found in Europe or Japan. It is found in China. On paper, Beijing is Tehran's most important ally. China is Iran's largest oil customer, its most significant trading partner, and in the current conflict, arguably the only major power keeping the Iranian economy from complete collapse. Iran's leadership has repeatedly pointed to the China relationship as proof that Western sanctions and American pressure cannot truly isolate Tehran. Beijing, in their telling, is the lifeline. But Beijing is also a commercial civilization first, and an ideological partner second. And the Chinese ports of Xiamen, Nanchang, and Tianjin have now been integrated directly into Saudi Arabia's new 9-port network. The logic is cold, clear, and utterly devastating for Iran. Chinese factories require uninterrupted flows of Middle Eastern oil to keep production lines running around the clock. Thousands of containers loaded with electronics, machinery, and manufactured goods must reach Gulf markets every single day without disruption. A war in the Strait of Hormuz does not just inconvenience China. It drives a dagger straight into the heart of the Chinese industrial economy. And the leadership in Beijing, whatever its public statements about strategic partnership with Tehran, has absolutely no intention of allowing Iran's military gambles to threaten the commercial engine that sustains Chinese prosperity. So China accepted Saudi Arabia's offer, quietly, pragmatically, and without announcement. Chinese ports joined the new Saudi network. Chinese shipping companies began routing cargo through the Red Sea corridor. Chinese oil purchases from Saudi Arabia began flowing through Petroline rather than through Hormuz. On one hand, Beijing continues to play the game of strategic partnership with Iran, offering diplomatic cover, avoiding full alignment with American pressure, maintaining the appearance of solidarity. On the other hand, it has already placed its commercial bets on the winning horse. It has already secured its energy supply lines through Saudi Arabia's bypass architecture. It has already ensured that whatever happens in the Strait of Hormuz, Chinese factories will keep running. This move severs China's logistical dependence on Iran's geographic position as cleanly and permanently as a surgeon's cut. And Iran, watching from Tehran, cannot say a word about it, because openly accusing China of betrayal would mean losing the one major power still offering it any protection at all. Japan tells the same story from a different angle. The ports of Kobe, Nagoya, and Yokohama, three of the most strategically significant industrial ports in the Pacific, are now directly connected to the Saudi network. This matters enormously, and not simply because Japan is a massive oil importer. Japan holds approximately 16 million tons of strategic petroleum reserves, one of the largest stockpiles in the world. Those reserves are Japan's insurance policy against exactly the kind of crisis the Strait of Hormuz closure has created. But reserves run out, and in a prolonged conflict that keeps Hormuz closed for months, Japan's industrial machine eventually begins to slow. The connection to Saudi Arabia's bypass network eliminates that vulnerability entirely. Japanese energy imports can now flow through the Red Sea, through Jeddah, through the Saudi land corridor, and into the Gulf without passing through a single meter of water that Iran can threaten. The Japanese industrial machine is freed from the choke point, and Saudi Arabia gains a powerful new partner with compelling strategic reasons to want Hormuz permanently bypassed. The European dimension of the nine-port network completes the picture of what Riyadh has built. The ports of Southampton in the United Kingdom, Rotterdam in the Netherlands, and Hamburg in Germany, three of the most important commercial gateways into European heavy industry, are now anchored into the same network. European manufacturers, energy companies, and logistics operators can now access Gulf oil and route goods to Asian markets through a supply chain that owes nothing to Iranian geography. The European market, which had long accepted the Hormuz risk as an unavoidable feature of the global energy system, now has a permanent alternative. And alternatives, once they exist and prove reliable, become the new normal. But Saudi Arabia did not stop at building a maritime network. The second layer of its bypass strategy is something that has rarely been seen in logistics history: a hybrid sea-land-sea route developed in partnership with MSC, the world's largest container shipping company. MSC's involvement is itself a statement of market confidence so powerful that no press release could match it. When the world's dominant container shipping operator stakes its commercial reputation on a new trade route, it is telling every shipper, every manufacturer, every supply chain manager on Earth that this route works, that it is reliable, and that it is the future. The mechanics of the MSC route are a genuine feat of engineering ambition. Container ships departing from Europe's major ports enter the warm waters of the Red Sea and dock directly at Saudi Arabia's Jeddah and King Abdullah ports. There, advanced port systems, operating with the kind of precision and speed that Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 investments have made possible, unload the cargo with remarkable efficiency. At that point, the route does something extraordinary. It leaves the water entirely. The containers are loaded onto fleets of heavy transport vehicles, moving along a high-security logistics corridor that runs approximately 1,300 kilometers across the Saudi Arabian peninsula. This is not ordinary road transport. It is a satellite-tracked, continuously monitored supply chain, operating at industrial scale across one of the most strategically protected corridors in the region. The Saudi government has deployed the most advanced air and missile defense systems available to protect this land bridge, ensuring that Iranian drones and missiles, which have already demonstrated their willingness to strike Gulf infrastructure, cannot interrupt the flow. The cargo traverses the Saudi desert from west to east, arriving at the port of Dammam on the country's eastern coast. From Dammam, the goods are transferred to fast feeder vessels that distribute them throughout the Gulf, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, at speeds that make the traditional Hormuz route look slow by comparison. The result is a complete circumvention of Iranian control. Not a single container moving through this system passes through the waters Iran patrols. Not a single barrel of oil reaches its destination through a choke point Iran can threaten. The entire system operates outside the reach of Iran's fast attack craft, its naval mines, and its ballistic missile threats. For Iran, this MSC partnership is not merely a commercial setback. It is a strategic catastrophe. Global logistics giants do not commit their operations and their reputations to routes they consider temporary or unreliable. MSC's commitment to the Saudi corridor signals to every player in international trade that this bypass is permanent, that it will still be operating long after the current conflict ends, long after whatever ceasefire or agreement eventually emerges from the current negotiations. The world's supply chains are being rewired around Iran's position, and once rewired, supply chains do not revert. The third element of Saudi Arabia's bypass strategy is the one that has been running the longest and has proven its value most dramatically during the current crisis. The East-West pipeline, known as Petroline, is a masterpiece of strategic infrastructure. Running 1,200 kilometers from the Abqaiq oil processing center near Saudi Arabia's eastern coast to the Yanbu export hub on the Red Sea, the pipeline carries crude oil entirely beneath the Saudi desert, entirely beyond the reach of anything Iran can deploy in the Persian Gulf, entirely outside the geographic reality of the Strait of Hormuz. Petroline's capacity is staggering, rated at 5 million barrels per day, with a confirmed upgrade capability to 7 million barrels per day. During the height of the Hormuz crisis in 2026, Saudi Arabia activated Petroline at full maximum capacity. 7 million barrels per day of Saudi crude flowed west under the desert and emerged at Yanbu, where it was loaded onto tankers already on the safe side of Hormuz, already in the Red Sea, already connected to global markets that Iran cannot threaten or interrupt. Saudi Arabia then made a public statement that no diplomatic communiqué could have matched. It announced, on the record, that it no longer needs the Strait of Hormuz. The world's largest oil exporter, the country whose production decisions move global oil markets more than any other single actor, declared itself independent of the choke point that Iran had used as its greatest weapon. Those words, once spoken, cannot be unspoken. That reality, once demonstrated at 7 million barrels per day of sustained throughput, cannot be denied. When Petroline is combined with the 9-port Jeddah maritime network and MSC's hybrid land-sea corridor, the result is what analysts have described as a triple logistical siege. 3 independent bypass routes operating simultaneously, routing the world's energy and trade around Iran's geographic position, through water, through land, and through steel pipes buried under the desert. Saudi Arabia is not the only country moving in this direction. The UAE's Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, running 380 kilometers from the Habshan oil fields to the port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, is pumping at maximum capacity, delivering UAE crude directly to open ocean shipping routes that bypass Hormuz entirely. Fujairah, already the world's 3rd busiest bunkering hub, has become the eastern anchor of the bypass architecture, handling volumes of oil and refined products that would have seemed impossible before the crisis. Iraq, emerging from decades of conflict with renewed strategic ambition, is advancing the Development Road Project, a $17 billion infrastructure initiative connecting the Grand Fa port in Basra directly to Turkey's Mediterranean coast through a combined railway and highway network. When complete, this corridor will allow Iraqi oil and Asian goods to reach Europe without passing through the Strait of Hormuz, without entering the Persian Gulf at all. A cargo loaded onto a train in Basra will be able to reach the heart of Europe via Istanbul. Iraq, associated for so long with instability and conflict, is positioning itself as the Silk Road of the 21st century, a secure overland bridge that owes nothing to Iranian geography. Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain, small states whose geographic position had made them particularly vulnerable to Iranian pressure, are rapidly integrating into the expanding bypass networks that Saudi Arabia and the UAE have constructed. For years, these countries had no alternative. Their access to global markets ran through Hormuz, which meant their economic security was perpetually subject to Iranian threats. That vulnerability is now being systematically eliminated, one pipeline and one port connection at a time. The cumulative effect of all these moves is the permanent reconfiguration of Middle Eastern trade and energy flows away from Iranian control. Iran's strategists built the Hormuz weapon on a single assumption: that the world had no alternative. That assumption is now broken. And unlike deterrence postures or diplomatic relationships, infrastructure does not change its mind. A pipeline that has been built does not stop flowing because Iran issues a threat. A port connection that has been established does not close because Tehran objects. The physical reality of what Saudi Arabia has constructed is immune to the kind of pressure Iran has historically applied. What does Iran have left? It has fast attack craft conducting exercises in waters that decreasing numbers of commercial ships are choosing to transit. It has ballistic missiles aimed at infrastructure that is increasingly protected by advanced air defense systems. It has the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point that the world has now demonstrated it can survive without, adapt around, and engineer its way past. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards may one day look through their binoculars at the Strait of Hormuz and find themselves watching empty water. Not because the world has been defeated, but because the world has found another way. Saudi Arabia has refused to weaponize its geography the way Iran weaponized its own. Instead, it has chosen to make its territory a bridge, an open, commercially reliable connection between Asia and Europe that serves the interests of every country willing to trade in peace rather than threaten in crisis. That choice is transforming the Middle East more profoundly than any military operation could. Iran entered this crisis believing that its control of Hormuz made it indispensable. What Saudi Arabia has proven, with pipelines, with port connections, with the world's largest shipping company as a partner, is that indispensability is not a permanent condition. It is an engineering problem, and engineering problems, given sufficient motivation and resources, always get solved. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer the dark, frightening choke point where Iran could hold the world's energy hostage. The waters remain, the geography remains, but the leverage is gone, evaporating barrel by barrel through Petroline, container by container through the MSC land corridor, tanker by tanker through Fujairah. Iran's greatest weapon is not being destroyed by force. It is being made irrelevant by ingenuity. And that is a defeat from which there is no recovery. Because you cannot threaten your way back to relevance once the world has already found another way. The question that remains, and it is the question that will define the next chapter of this crisis, is what Iran will do next. Cornered, isolated, watching its most powerful strategic tool become obsolete in real time, the Tehran administration faces a choice that grows starker with every barrel that flows through Petroline, every container that crosses the Saudi land bridge, every oil tanker that loads at Fujairah without passing through a single meter of Iranian-controlled water. Will it accept the new reality quietly? Will it lash out more aggressively against the bypass infrastructure, risking the further alienation of every remaining partner it has, including China? Will it attempt to sabotage the pipelines, the ports, the logistics corridors that Saudi Arabia has built? And in doing so, confirm to the entire world that it is an actor incapable of accepting a changed reality? Or will it find a path toward a negotiated settlement that acknowledges what the logistics map of the Middle East is already showing? That the era of Hormuz as an Iranian weapon is over, that the world has moved on, and that the only future available to Iran is one in which it chooses trade and prosperity over threats and isolation? Those are the questions that will shape the next decade of Middle Eastern history, and the answers will determine not just Iran's future, but the future of the entire global energy order for generations to come.